In this video I'm going to talk about writing a thesis or a dissertation. And I'm going to do a series of videos about writing a dissertation or a thesis. Let's say it's a doctoral thesis that you're going to spend the next 2 years writing and preparing. You may be writing a master's thesis or master's dissertation, not a doctoral dissertation, but the advice is still going to be the same. If you aim for a doctoral thesis and you miss it, you'll be left with a master's dissertation. So I'm not going to go into the details of what the difference between mastersness is or doctoralness is, but the structure of the thing is very similar. And if you're a more experienced researcher, if you're planning a research project, a bid for research money, very similar considerations apply. And you'll probably, if you're a master's student, doctoral student, you'll go and talk to people in your class, your peers. You'll ask them about what they're doing about their dissertation. And you might go onto the internet and look for people who are talking about templates for a dissertation, and you're very likely to be offered the structure of a dissertation. And the typical advice about a research dissertation is it'll look like this. You'll have an introduction where you introduce your topic, you'll have a literature review, survey of the literature, methodology chapter that sets out how you've thought about the philosophical implications of your work, data collection about what evidence you've collected, analysis, conclusions and recommendations, and you've got a complete work. And you have got a complete work, it's perfectly good. I want you to stop thinking like that. It's not that it's wrong, it's not even that it's a bad outline. You may come back and that may be the outline of the thesis that you eventually produce. But I want you to think about something different. I want you to think about the jobs that you have to do in your thesis. Because a literature review, the title of the chapter, doesn't tell you what's got to be in it. The methodology doesn't tell you what's... And the methodology chapter is likely to be, if you're going to look at some samples, it's going to be a really rather formulaic, dull chapter where the author says, well, I had to choose between qualitative methods and quantitative methods, and I chose this, and I chose to do that, and I've used these authors for the analysis, and it doesn't really engage. Nobody wants to read it. What's it there for? What's the methodology chapter there for? And I want you to start thinking about that. What is it the introduction has to do? And what's in the literature review has to do? What does data collection have to provide? And how does that follow through to the conclusions? But before you can do that, you have to ask yourself, what's the dissertation for? What's a thesis do? You're going to devote the next year, 2 years, 3 years to writing this document. You should have a fairly clear idea at the outset of what you want to do with that, and what it has to do, and what jobs that thesis has to do. And the fact of the matter is, at the end of your complicated study, you want to be able to say something. You want to be able to make a claim. You want to be an authority, you want to be somebody who can say authoritatively, this is what I've found out. I am telling you that children who have an hour's mathematics class every day perform better at mathematics than children who don't. Children who have an hour of mathematics compulsorily every day learn to love mathematics more than children who don't. Children who are allowed to freely read whatever book they like learn to read more quickly than those who are told that they have to read this document or that document. Or the opposite. Whatever it is you've got a bee in your bonnet about that you want to be able to say something at the end of your study. And in order to make that authoritative claim, you are going to be looking for evidence. And that's where the data collection comes in. You're going to collect evidence. And the evidence will support your claim. But before you can say that's evidence of the claim, you have to say that you have to ensure that it is evidence of the claim. So I want to tell you, at the end of 3 years of study, I want to tell you there are no unidentified flying objects from other stellar systems coming to visit us. The evidence I've got for that is the government would have told us. The government hasn't told us that there are intergalactic travellers visiting us. Well, is that evidence? Is the fact that the government hasn't told me that there are intergalactic travellers evidence that there are no intergalactic travellers? Well, you need a general principle. You need to say, look, my government tells me everything I need to know. And the evidence, the case of the intergalactic travellers is an example of things they could have told me. And that's called the warrant. It's the link between the evidence and the claim. The warrant is, this is an example of a specific case. This is a specific case of a general principle which supports my claim. So you'd be saying, it's very clear that children who experienced corporal punishment do not enjoy school. So the claim you're making, children who experience corporal punishment don't enjoy school. Evidence, you'll collect evidence about children who have experienced corporal punishment, children who haven't experienced corporal punishment, and the warrant is you'll explain that this is a scientific design of an experiment where if you change one of the inputs, you expect to see differences in the outputs. So it's a specific example of a general claim that you can work out what is affecting people by changing the circumstances in which you're studying them. So that's the second part. You've now got evidence of a claim and a warrant that links the evidence to the claim, and then there's some general context in which you're studying, and that provides the backing, schooling, the background of schooling, what we know about schooling, what we know about what generally counts as corporal punishment or what generally counts as literacy. We've got things in the background that we're going to call upon so that our project over the year or two that we're developing our thesis is we're going to be wanting at the end to make a claim. We're going to want to base that claim on evidence. We're going to want to provide a warrant that suggests or explains the link between the evidence and the claim, and then we're going to think about that in the context of the generally agreed background that we're working in. But that's not going to be enough, because you also need to be thinking what the people on the other side of the argument, what the people who object to your claim, what might they be saying? There's the rebuttal, that the people who don't agree with you have an alternative way of seeing the situation. So you've said a compulsory hour of maths every day will improve children's performance at mathematics. The rebuttal might be, no, that's it, you're looking at a situation that may have been influenced by the personality of the maths teacher. The maths teacher may be the confounding influence here, and it may not be the extra compulsory hour. It may be that the maths teacher is a better teacher or a more enthusiastic teacher, or it may be that it's not the actual studying of the extra hour of maths that makes the difference. It may be the fact that they're forced to study for an extra hour signals the importance of the topic. There are many different ways in which people may reject your claim. So you need to think of what that is, and then you need to be able to say, but I've taken that into account, and I'm actually making a more limited claim. I'm adding a qualifier. I said that a compulsory hour of maths was going to be the difference. I actually meant if we hold still the characteristics of the teacher. The same teacher teaching the class will produce different results if there's a compulsory hour. Or an hour of reading every day will improve a child's literacy. But I've qualifier, I've got particular teaching methods in my mind, and so I'm only making this claim for a limited range of teaching methods. So that you've got a claim you want to make, you've given context, you've given the evidence, you've given the warrant, you've understood and anticipated certain objections to the claim that you're going to make, and you've added qualifiers to make very specific the claim, to make sure that you're not just saying a very general and non-specific and obvious conclusion. You're saying something quite concrete. And this organisation is called an argument. An argument is not two people standing up having a fight. An argument is a reasoned construction of laying out the evidence for a claim and the various elements that go up to make that claim and support that claim in terms of how the evidence is connected, how it is presented. And this is the structure of an argument as set out by a British philosopher called Stephen Toulmin. And he's argued that an argument is a rhetorical device. You're trying to persuade people that what you're saying has some value, that you've got some grounds for it, some evidence for it, that the evidence actually does support the claim, that you've anticipated and argued against different points of view, and that you've made, in response to thinking about those rebuttals, you've added qualifiers to make sure you're talking very specifically about a claim that can be supported and can be upheld. Now, that doesn't map onto the structure of the dissertation as you've been told it by your friends or as you've found it on the internet. The structure of the dissertation in terms of chapters, if it turns out like that, fine, but the methodology is, well, where does the methodology fit in? Well, the methodology has something to do with the warrant, and the evidence has something to do with the data collection, but the exact jobs that have to be done are these. And the structure is your convenience. You don't necessarily need a separate chapter of a literature review. You might spread the use of the literature throughout the whole thesis, throughout the whole dissertation. So when you're thinking about planning a dissertation, put that aside, put the structure aside, think about the jobs that you want to do. And you are preparing yourself. Imagine yourself in the future being an accomplished researcher, having got to the end of this journey, and you're going to tell the world what you've discovered. You're going to make a claim. It's your claim. It's going to be different, hopefully, from anybody else's claim. And you want it to be noticed. You want it to be heard. You want it to be understood. And you don't want it to be dismissed by somebody who's got the answer and an opposite argument. So these are the jobs that have to be done, and thinking about those will help us to design our approach to the thesis, to the dissertation. So I'll come on to the separate jobs that need to be done in the course of the next few videos, but come back again to the insight offered by David Cantor and Gavin Fairbairn in their book Becoming an Author, that the experienced researcher doesn't do the research and then write the document. They plan the document, the writing of the document, right in from the beginning. You are doing the research so that you can make a claim. Now, you may discover that the claim you want to make today isn't supported by the evidence, and you have to make a slightly different claim. You may discover that the arguments against the claim are stronger than you thought, and the qualifiers need to be more restrictive. There are all sorts of ways in which the journey may change what you can say, but the purpose of a doctoral dissertation, master's dissertation, is to make you more knowledgeable about an area so that you can contribute your two pennyworth to the discussion that is going on, and you will be accepted, if you've done the job well, you will be accepted as an authoritative voice on the topic of your choice. That's the general plan of the dissertation, and we'll come back to the individual tasks in a subsequent video.